So what I would like to talk to you here is about absolute value and what it means to solve an absolute value equation. So I want to remind you, when you see these symbols right here, it just means how far is this from 0? And so the absolute value of 7 is 7 because here's 0, here's 7. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces from 0, but the absolute value of negative 7 is also 7 because it is 7 spaces from 0. I think I might have done 8 spaces. But absolute value just means how far is it? How far is it from 0? So down here, when we're looking at this question, what number's absolute value is 5? Well, there are two numbers that make this true. 5's absolute value is 5, so I can replace this x with a 5, right? So x can be 5 because the absolute value of 5 is 5. It is 5 away from a 0. As well, negative 5 can be in there. So there's two solutions to this one. Because negative 5, when I take its absolute value, when I say how far is it from 0, I'm going to find out that it is 5 away from 0. So when you're solving an absolute value equation, you're basically saying, you're thinking for a moment, okay, what in here, what can that mess be that equals 5? Well, we know that this mess can equal 5, or this mess can equal negative 5. So then we go back, I'm like, okay, if this mess has to be, I have to figure out x plus 5 is that mess. I got to figure out what x has to be to make that 5, and then I also have to figure out what it would have to be to make it negative 5. And you can do this in your head if you'd like, but that's the idea. You're solving two equations. This one, probably did it in your head. It's all good. X has to be 0, because 0 plus 5 is going to give you 5, and the absolute value of 5 is 5, so yay, yes. And then here, we find out that x is equal to negative 10, and sure enough, if you put negative 10 plus 5 into the original thing, I get the absolute value of negative 5. The absolute negative 5 is 5, so yay, yes, we have the two solutions. Okay? Danger, Will Robinson, we have a not possible thing. Absolute value, by definition, asks you how far is it from 0, and that answer is always a positive answer. So the minute that you see an absolute value equation having a negative, you're going to say, there are no solutions to this. There is nothing that makes this true, ever. Let's look at one more of these. We have this mess inside has to equal 20. So this mess this time, this 5x plus 5 has to equal 20 because the absolute value of 20 is 20. And then we want to find out what's going to make the absolute value of, we're going to try and find out what will make this stuff inside negative 20. Those are the two equations we're going to solve. And maybe this one you can't do in your head, maybe you can. This is supposed to say 20, not 2, by the way. And then we're going to go ahead and solve these equations. I'm going to use opposite operations. You can use whatever method you want. I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides here. I end up with 5 times x equals 15. I'm going to divide both sides by 5, and x is 3. So if I plug it back in, I get 5 times 3 plus 5. I get 15 plus 5 is 20. Sure enough, the absolute value of 20 is 20. This is just my check down here. This is just to make sure I did it right. And you can always check by plugging your solution back in. Same thing here. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 5. And I get 5x equals negative 25. And I'm going to go ahead and divide by 5 because it's a multiplication problem. And I get x equals negative 5. So these are my two solutions. X equals 3 and x equals negative 5. I'm going to go ahead and take this negative 5 and slap it in right here. 5 times negative 5 is negative 25. Negative 25 plus 5 is negative 20. Absolute value of negative 20 is 20. So here we go. So long story short, you are going to be solving two equations when you're solving an absolute value one. The one that gives you the positive result of this and the one that gives you the negative result.